Hi, in today's video, we are going to see how to use Flomesh Software Load Balancer or FLB in short. We'll create and configure layer 4 and 7 load balancer, virtual IPs, publish and consume APIs, and few more steps. FLB offers much more functionality and I'll be covering few of them. Please visit FLB website and documentation for more and extensive details. I have already installed and logged into my fresh installation of FLB. Just get a quick understanding overview of FLB quick console. When you log in, this is the first page you'll be seeing. This is the main entrance of the workplace, and that shows how many organizations do you have created. As you can see, we haven't created any organization or project. And if you like to switch the language, you can switch the language from this menu. FLB supports 3 different languages. And these are the user details, and these are some shortcuts. This is the main menu, the cube here. Just to get a quick understanding of what it offers. The system menu, this is the one where you do a system level configuration of the FLB. You configure the dashboards, you create the dashboards, you create the organizations, projects, users, and roles, and ACLs. Similarly, FLB is a multi-tenant environment. That's why it says that you can create multiple organizations and projects and users and associate them with different roles. WebPro, this provides some links to the dashboards. That's dashboards actually which you configure via FLB. If you install Jaeger, then you can, clicking on this link is actually going to open a Jaeger dashboard. Ops Center or Operation Center, this is the main which is used to configure the FLB itself. The registry, this is the components if you want to manage external Kubernetes, Zookeeper, console, or some others. And certificates, this is where you are going to import or store your TLS certificates, and then you can use them when you're defining the layer 4 or layer 7 load balancer. And these are the components which are used by the FLB, and we'll be using this link to create few components as well as the certificates. And this shows the events, and this is the log where you can view all of the captured logs if you have configured the component correctly. And the pipe manage component this is where you're going to define a templates for your layer 4, layer 7, and tunnels and other things. Similarly, inspector offers some inspection utilities, and open API. This is actually a layer 7 load balancer interface. You have the dashboards, topology, and others. API manage, where you'll be managing the APIs. And service mesh, this is currently we don't have any service mesh installed. So when you install the service mesh, for example, Flomesh service mesh, you will have more options here, and you can also install and configure and manage Flomesh service mesh within the FLB. Load balancer, this is the link which is used to create a layer 4 load balancer, be it TCP or UDP load balancer, and we'll be going through that one. And this is the registry. If you created a registry here, then all those registries will be listed here so that you can select one, for example, Kubernetes external one, and these are the zones. So that is a very quick and brief overview of that one. So just to start, it's better to create an organization first. So let's create an organization. You have 2 ways to create an organization. Here, this is the quick link. You can click on that one, or you can go to the main menu, systems, and the organization. Organization is the top level entity, and all the projects, users, and all of the details will be under the organization. Creating an organization is quite simple. All you have to do is just provide a name of the organization. For example, I say my demo org and the description. And then hit create. So we have created the organization. As you see, we don't have any associated projects, users, and services, but we'll be creating a project and then associated that project with this organization. So to create a project, go to the systems and projects. Hit create project. The name of the project. The project actually will contains multiple APIs, the layer 7 things. We'll be doing that in later steps. So just create a skeleton for the project entries. We just call it project 1. And this is where the organization we created our demo org. So once we'll do the linkage of that one, so this project will be only visible to this demo org and the users within this organization. So you can have complete isolations of the projects and organizations. Hit create. Let's create another one. Let's call it project 2. We'll select the same organization and hit create. Now we can close this one projects. Now here in the organization, we can see we have 2 projects linked to it. If you open that one, you can see the details. Okay, so we are done with this part. Now let's create our few components. Operation, components. So here you see a list of the components which FLB supports. The first one is the log. Currently we don't have any of the components added here, so that's what you're seeing here. So the first one is log. That is actually a generic logger logger which you can configure different 4LB or 7LB to use to store their logs there. And the Prometheus ClickHouse. ClickHouse is the default log store that FLB use, but you can use any of the default store, MySQL or PostgreSQL. So we'll be first creating a ClickHouse. I've already installed the ClickHouse with the same installation of the FLB. So let's add a ClickHouse component. This is a type which you can create all of the components like the ClickHouse. Give it a name. Just call it, for example, ch. And this is the host where the ClickHouse is listening. So I have the ClickHouse running on this host 10.02.6. And this is the port it's listening on 30123. User of the ClickHouse port. And we are done. Do the create. Okay, the next component we need to create is a logger. Just this one. Create components, select log, and give it a name. I will just call it logger. And here you select the type. Actually, this is the components where you want to, or you can think of this is the store where you want to store the logs there. So we'll be using ClickHouse. That's why I'm selecting the ClickHouse here. And this is the location of the ClickHouse and the log table of the click. This is the table in the ClickHouse which will be used to store the logs. I've created a table name log. Okay, so we added a ClickHouse and logger, also add a Prometheus so that we can capture the metrics. Give it a name. Let's call it Prom. And I'll be using this Kubernetes service address. Here you have to provide the URL where the Prometheus is listening. Just use Prometheus. And the port. Hit create. So we have it added. And we are doing some management tasks here, right? So these are the mostly tasks done by the administrator. But for this demo purposes, I'm just showing you the steps which are required once you start with the initial or the fresh installation. So let's add certificates as well. TLS system. So what I have done is actually I've created a self-signed certificate for demo purposes. But if you have your own certificates, you can just use those certificates here and just give it a name. So I will just call it, because I'll be using it with layer 4 LB. So just FLB TLS. And this is the type. So it's put different types here. The first type is API. Because we are creating this TLS, or we'll be using this TLS for our load balancer. So, for layer 4 or layer 7 load balancers, you need to select the first type. And now here you need to just paste, the certificates keys and the certificate itself. So I have already created here in this folder server key and server served. So let me just copy that one. I'll just go back to my third. Similarly, I need to get the key, private key. Okay, so we have created the certificate now. To create a load balancer, we need to have some kind of backend services running. Currently, I don't have anything running on my VMs here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to demo services which we can use. So we can use the PyP to create a very simple services. What it need to be done, it will be just returning some text. For example, we say, okay, we'll use PyP, and then IP for service will listen on port 8081, and it's just serve the HTTP. So we could say that hello from service 1, and just run it in the backend. Okay, to create another service and listen on port 8082. Okay, so we have two services running. Just to do a double check if they're running or not. 81, okay, and 82. So our services are up and running. So the next step is we need to create a load balancer. Go back to our FLB window. To create an FLB, we need to go to the PyP manage options here. So as you can see, actually we need to, when you're creating layer 4 load balancer, layer 7 load balancer, or tunnels, we have to create a template here. So create a pipe here, but I'm going to call it 4LB1, or you can call it N. And the type here, you need to select the 4LB because we are going to create a layer 4 load balancer. And which organization, and the template, like the default, and the log where we want to store our log. That's the logger which we created the company. And you can configure other settings here, but we are going to stay with the default one. This is the BGP options which we will get back to later. Okay, so we are good with this. Create. So this is not a load balancer. This is just a template telling me, kind of, the high level configuration or the basic configurations. What kind of, high level options our load balancer is going to have. For example, here we can see the maximum connections, read timeout, write timeout, so on and so forth, right? So we have this one, and before we can create a load balancer, we need to create an address pool. Virtual IP address where our load balancer will be listening. So go to the load balancer one, address pool, and create a new address pool. I will just call it my header pool -1, and which organization. For demo organization, again, we need to provide the seeders, IP ranges we can select. So we can go with the IP range, or we can go with the seeders. This is IPv4, and if you want to do a load balancer for IPv6, you can select the IPv6 range and so forth. We just go with IPv4, and I'll be just setting seeder range to 1.10.1.24. Okay, so we are done. So we added an address pool. So now we can create our, close this. Now we can create our load balancer. For load balancer, we don't have any, just create a new one. Give it a name. You can just call it, I'll just call it for everyone, similar to that one. Which organization, and this is the address pool which we just created. Select the address pool and the cluster, the 4LB, the templates we created right earlier for LB1. And if you want to have TLS enabled, you need to check this one. But for this, for LB1, we will be just going with a simple non-TLS, and we'll be creating a TLS in the later steps. And this is the port where our load balancer will be listening. This is the load balancer port. Okay, so let's just give it a port 8000. And here we need to select the protocol. So is it a TCP or UDP based? For our demo purposes, we're just going with the TCP. And this is the load balancer settings. Now we need to configure the endpoints. This is the reason why we created those two services, our 8081 and 8082, so that actually our load balancer can forward the traffic to those two endpoints. So we have that one. So you need to provide a list. Here we're saying that the IP and the port and the weight. If you provide the weight, that is mean the weighted round robin. So this is the algorithm. So we are going with the default one. The default is round robin one. And if you don't provide the weights, that's the normal one. But if you want to go with the weighted round robin, then you need to provide the weight as well, just as an example. So I'll be using the one which we created, right? So this is the IP of my VM where those two services are running, and these are the ports there. Others we don't need to set. If you like sticky sessions, you can configure those options. So I'll just go with the default. Right, so this is actually the layer 4 load balancer configuration, everything done. Now, as an admin, actually, we need to create a IP or the startup IP instance so that that can read these configurations and create an actual load balancer. What we're going to do is here, and we need to run that with the sudo privileges, remember, because we give the VIP to the admin, and so that that's going to create all those virtual IPs. So let's run it. What I'm doing here is running a IP, and this address is actually the IP repo address of our 4L with the sudo. Now this is started, right? So you can see actually that this is our procedure which we provided, right? So, and listening on 8,000. Okay, so that shows actually IP was able to create a VIP of the range which we were requested, and that's now listening on this address on port 8080. So let's do a quick test. We can test it. HTTP. Instead of our local host, what we need to do is, for example, we can just try this 178. 88,000. Remember, 8,000 port is our load balancer port. We are not accessing the services directly now, but we are accessing them via the load balancer. Here we go. So we can access the service, right? And because the bell algorithm we set up is the round robin one, if you remember, right? So the next attempt, it should invoke the service 2. Here we go. And if we run it again, that will go back to the service 1. So our this layer 4 load balancer is working. But now this VIP is only visible or available on the same VM where we are running it, but we want to actually make it available to other nodes as well. So what we can do is actually we can go with the BGP. IP does comes with a support, and that can act as a BGP speaker. So this is another machine. Right, so this is another machines where I have a BGP router FRR running. So let's do a BGP configuration so that the IP can act as a speaker and communicate, enroll yourself to this router, and so that from this neighbor we can access our these VIPs. So configure a VIP is easy part. IP manage the templates we created, right? Here we see is a BGP setting. Here we are going to add for the BGP one ID. I'm just going to leave it empty. The peers, this is the router peer. So this is the address of BGP router. If you remember this one. And next hop, we don't have any other hops because only 2 of them running, and they're reachable. Here we have to provide the seeders, which we did. Others, we don't want any IPv6. Give it. Just hit save. All right, so we configure the BGP settings. But there is one step left. Now the BGP settings are there. If you remember, because that's just a template, right? So we need to create or start a BGP speaker. And BGP speakers, because that's going to create a second VIPs, also need to be run as a sudo. if I can hide. Yeah, good. Yeah. So now this is running. And let's see if we can access our this virtual IP, which we were able to access from the same VM, VM2. This is VM1. Let's see if we can access that. Let's try 178.10.10.1.8%. We are able to access that. This means the BGP speaker is. Now let's create a TLS because we already created a certificate there, right? So to TLS certifications as well. So to get the TLS one, so as it mentions, we can either enable the TLS on the same load balancer which we created, or we can create a new one. For this demo purposes, I'm just going to create a new load balancer, and that is only TLS. Let's do a new. So we'll call it 4LB TLS1. Organization is on same address pool, same templates, but here I will enable the TLS. Once we enable the TLS, we need to select the certificates from the store. That was the reason we added our the certificates, right? So we're just going to select the certificate which we created. And if you want to configure the ciphers, then you can configure the ciphers, but we are not going to do that one. And then select the same protocol. We'll just go with the TCP and the port, TLS port. I'm just going to use 444 for this one. And similarly, which host or the services this TLS is going to forward to the traffic. So I'm just going to use the same services which we just started. And I'm just going to leave things as is, and just hit create. Okay, so we have created this one, our TLS certificate. Now, see, now we don't need to create, the start PyP, because PyP was able to know that, there is a new configuration of the new load balancer, and that's going to do that one. So let's just try to see that if we can access our HTTPS, because see that I did. Four. Good. So because we are using the self-signed certificates, so that's why what I'm saying here is actually the curl is saying that self-signed certificate is not valid. So let's just use the -k options so that curl can ignore the certificate validations. And here we go. So we are able to access our TLS services. So that's for layer 4 load balancing. In the next step, what we are going to do is we are going to create a layer 7 load balancer. Just this one. And similarly, the layer 7, we have to go to this one, Op Center, IP Manage, because we already have opened. We created the 4LB. Now we need to create an API one. API refers to the 7 layer or layer 7. Just create a new load balancer. I'm going to call it 7LB1. And the type need to be API. API is actually the layer 7 or 7LB. And the port, HTTP port 8080 https 8443 templates default, where we need to store the logs, and we can leave the other things as is. Just hit create. Okay, so we have the templates created for this one. Now, because this is a layer 7, right? So we need to kind of create APIs are the providers which we can use to serve this, the layer 7 load balancer. So what we need to do is we need to go to the open API and the provider, and let's add a new provider. Call it hi, simple hi, and algorithm is round robin. And then host, we need to add the host which we use. Our services are running. I'm using the same service because service is running 8081 and 026 8082, and we are not going to set any weight, but if you want a weighted round robin, then you can set the weights. Good. Create. Okay, we have created a provider. Now we need to create the API. Go to the open API and API manage. Here we are going to create a new API. Set the name. I just call it hi. Which project is linked to project 1? I will say that our layer 7 load balancer template, again the pipey, which one we'll be using, like that one. And audit level, if we need to set, we're going to set that one. And the other things, we need to provide the endpoint. So the protocol HTTP method get, and select multiple methods, which is option. You're not going to provide any host. You can directly provide the host, but we'll be going with the provider which we created in previous step. And the path, so I'll just create. Now in the provider, we are going to say the provider name and just call it hi, and here you select the upstream, and in the upstreams we can select the provider protocol HTTP, and the path is going to remain the same. Okay, so we are done with this part. Okay, now once we create it, you see that timeline here, right? So we just finished the design phase of this API, and now it need to go to the review and approval process, and then the deployment. Once it is deployed, the external clients will be able to access that. Currently it's not deployed, it's just designed. So, and because this is a multi-tenant environment, right, and you can have the different roles logged in with the escalated privileges, so I can do all of those reviews and deployments, but you might have a different users with different roles. Some might have a reviewer roles, only them they will be able to review, and some might have some deployment roles, only them they can be able to deploy. So I'll just take that one. I'll just review by the comments, some comments, reviewed, commit, and then I need to deploy it. Deploying. Now this service is deployed. Just to make sure, we now, because this is a layer 7 load balancer, right? So what we need to do is we need to run another pipey instance. Again, this is an administrative task, right? So and one-time task, and only for the time when you start fresh, then you have to run these pipey instances, and later basis when you add new APIs, And you don't have to run the pipe instance. The same instance is going to manage us. So we are going to run IP, but this time we don't need sudo privileges. So I'm just going to start here. Okay, so now this is running on 8080, which we set 8443. And now let's see that, if we are able to access our API. Okay. Let's call it. Good. So we are able to access that one, right? So I just changed to different one. Sorry. Port is 8080. Try this one. We don't have any because we know our API link is high. Just do a high. Again, it's a round robin. Now our this service, our API is actually unprotected. So what if we want to add some kind of protections, maybe authentication mechanism? Let's do it. Go back to our console here. The same one, here you see the policy, right? This is the policy actually which need to be applied to this individual. And here add a plugin, and we offer multiple plugins, for example, basic, Jot, and others, cores, and so far as others. For this demo purposes, we just go with the basic one. Select the basic and set the username. I'll just call it Flomesh. Again, demo. Right. So we have added this one, basic authentication. Now we need to go through this again, review and deployment process. Because we have made the changes, right? So let's do the reviewed and deployed. And go back to our console. Let's try to access the service now. You see here, now we're getting an error, say the invalid token. So we are not, we are accessing a service with the basic auth. Access that one, use the Flomesh demo. And now we should be able to access, change the details, you see access denied. So this is where we can add the authentication. I'm gone with the basic authentication, but if you want, you can go with the JWT, and then you have to provide the API token and other. Okay, so let's continue with our load balancer. We have created the API. Now let's just create a kind of consumer, of this API. So we are just going to create a consumer. Call it consumer one, project one, and we can add authentication. So let's add authentication, maybe the basic as authentication for the test. I will just test. Password is 123 else because the basic one, right? And this is the code, consumer code, which the user of our this service they need to provide as a header value for authentication purpose. I'll just call it consumer one, or you can call it anything. Okay, so we have this. Save. We have created our consumer, but we haven't subscribed to any of the APIs. So what we need to do is next is to subscribe to an API which we already created. So there are two different ways to do that one. Either you can go here, subscription API. We don't have any, right? And the other option is go to the Open API market, and here you would be seeing the API we created. We have only one API. Click on this one, cart, subscribe. So now we have added it to the cart, subscription cart. And this is the API we subscribed. Okay, add to consume, like the consumer which we created. Now that is created, and if we go back to our consumer, right, so we can see already there, edit it here, we can subscription it here, or we can just click on this add to API market. That will do the same. It will go to the same workflow. Okay, so we have done it. Now let's just try to access this consumer. See that if we can do it. We'll be using test 123 and app code as a head. We can access. Change the app code. No, access denied. So that's the reason actually we are protecting this one by these app codes and authentication. So that is how you create a layer 7 load balancer, how you create an API, how you create a consumer. Similarly, we can take a look at the dashboards. So created that one, and this is the dashboard that is going to show the number of APIs running, the consumer, organization, how many projects you have, and these are the informations which you are getting from the Prometheus latency user agent. Actually, that shows how many user agents, how many access were made to this API and what are the user agents there, and the QPS metrics, API status, and these are the request sources, latency, request count, and others. And these are some few other widgets which we are using, and you can actually edit this one and you can add more widgets. So the number of widgets available is here. You can see here, right? So for the common widgets, workload, FLB, FSM. FSM is actually Flomesh service mesh. When you use as install the service mesh, you can use these widgets, and that's going to retrieve the information or the data from the service mesh and going to display them to you. Open API, we are using this one. This is a layer 7 FLB, layer 7 load balancer, and the customs one, right? So you can create your own custom widgets here, and you can use any of them. For example, PromQL or other sources. You're connected to that one, and then you can capture that one and you can create. So there are multiple options and much more functionality which we didn't cover today. For example, the registry, service mesh, inspector, and others. So you might be able to cover them in future videos. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or navigate to our website and the documentation. Thank you for watching.